This week on Quality Digest Live, U.S. manufacturing at the crossroads.
And we look at the social impacts of greenhouse gas emissions. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for September 16th, 2011. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Dirk Ducharme, editor-in-chief. Well, our first story is U.S. manufacturing competitiveness at a critical crossroads. This was a survey conducted by Booz and Company along with the University of Michigan Tober Institute of Global Operations. Basically what they talk about in here is that today U.S. manufacturing provides about 75% of the products that Americans consume. And this could go to 95% or it could go to 40% depending on how we deal with things going forward.
This is why the study talks about the crossroads, because it can really go either way here. Very, very important.
Exactly. And pretty much what they're saying here is they did this survey that included, let me just read from here. This report is based on a sector-by-sector analysis of U.S. industrial competitiveness, along with a survey of 200 manufacturing executives and experts. So basically they asked them a series of questions to find out where they were within this competitive market and what they were looking for going forward. Now, more than 65% of the survey respondents said that they intend to continue investing in new U.S. manufacturing assets and technologies through 2025. And many, and this is interesting, many are shifting their activities back into the United States from Asia and Latin American countries.
Because of rising prices over there, rising costs?
You know, they, in this brief, they didn't talk about that, but we do know, just from our own study and analysis, that labor costs are actually increasing, particularly in China. I mean, this is one of the interesting things about globalization, is it really is raising the standard of living in a lot of countries where the standard of living was really low.
Yeah, and you know, it's a good thing. I think we should emphasize that overall this is a good thing for American manufacturers as well, because more of those people then, as their standard of living raises, especially in Asia, will be able to buy American products too. And there's a lot of American products that are still made here that are desired over there.
Actually, that's an interesting little side issue. Is, well, we can get going on. we could get going on that. But yeah, I mean, basically that's right. As globalization increases and the world becomes, or at least parts of the world become richer, raises their quality of living. Now, part of raising your quality of living is, guess what? Your salary actually also increases, which means that in some areas, countries like China, it's no longer the cheapest labor. It's cheaper, but it's getting less cheaper as time goes by, and so it doesn't make sense in some cases to be sending your work overseas.
We're seeing and we're hearing that Chinese manufacturers are now outsourcing some of their low-end work, some of their piecework, to other Asian countries, Indonesia.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Thailand.
Isn't that interesting? Yes.
Yeah. So you know, we see this as a process that continues to flow in that direction.
Right, and manufacturing competitiveness, so it does still come into play, and the survey points out a couple of areas where we should be, or at least according to these authors, where we should be concentrating our efforts in terms of maintaining our strength in manufacturing. And I would show you here, but here we go. And I will bring it up here on my PowerPoint slide as soon as I can find it.
Technology.
Okay, there's four areas. One is where we stand as a global leader. So if we look at U.S. as global leaders, we're global leaders obviously in aerospace, chemicals, machinery, medical equipment, and semiconductor industries. And these have which gives us a critical worldwide advantage stemming from their high investment scale, established intellectual property, so on and so forth. So we don't want to lose this section of our industry. We've got to make sure that we keep concentrating on these areas, because we are global leaders and we don't want to lose our leadership from there. Next area is regional powers. as defined here, food, beverages, and tobacco, non-metallic mineral products, wood products, and petroleum and coal segments, among others, benefit from the United States as their largest market. Mexico and Canada have additional markets for these companies. So again, where we're strong regionally, we want to make sure that we continue to bolster these areas and don't let these areas slide and let other regions of the world kind of make inroads in here, because it's still very strong for us.
Absolutely.
Areas that are on the edge: paper, plastics, and electrical equipment and components, computer equipment, and so forth. Certain automotive equipment companies are besieged by low-cost overseas competitors.
And cost is the key here, because we see in this listing of products, of sectors, that it's lower and lower cost products.
Right.
And end products to the end user, the costs are lower and lower. So that's where the margins become such that they can drive those down to the lowest possible producer of those things.
Exactly. And finally, we've got niche players. Textiles, apparel, leather, furniture, and appliance companies have served small-scale niche markets throughout their domestic operations, while most production is outside the U.S.
Right. And we should add, I mean, there's a lot of. It's interesting to me that we talk about manufacturing. This particular survey dealt with manufacturing, but there are industries where America is still predominant and probably always will be. I mean, culturally, you look at the entertainment industry, for instance. Again, it is kind of manufacturing in a sense. If you look at, say, a big movie studio, they manufacture films.
Sure.
Those are blockbusters. All the blockbusters in the world generally come from the U.S. All the big music acts, most of them come from the U.S. Media, many times, is from the U.S. So there is still a predominance culturally, in terms of cultural manufacturing, that the U.S. really still dominates. But in terms of, old line manufacturing and some of these sectors that we've seen, there's been a deterioration.
Right.
For the reasons that I mentioned in the survey.
Let me scan something real quick here. Basically what the study said here is based on the relative economics for each manufacturing segment. The study charted the likely success of U.S. industries into these four categories.
Let's talk about the crossroads. Why is this a crossroads, and what are the choices that can be made that would either bring the 95% from the 75% or down to the 40%?
Great.
75%.
Just happen to have a slide on that. According to the study, these are the four things that we should be looking at, and some of these are interesting because they're topics we've talked about before. Think and grow regionally. That's the first point on the slide here. By that they mean the U.S. needs to build a better future with Mexico. Interesting. Shifting less demanding, labor-intensive processes to that country while helping to build a safer consumer economy there and retaining highly skilled work in the U.S. This actually ties into something later on they're going to talk about, which is immigration laws. Obviously, what we're talking about a lot that goes on here is going to be really politically charged.
Yes.
Because on the one hand, you definitely want to improve relations with Mexico. That has got to get better. But in order to get better, you got to look at immigration issues, and that's a hot button. And so I think manufacturing is, in many ways, and in many industries, caught right in the middle of this battle.
Well, look at NAFTA. Look at the politically charged debate about NAFTA. It's been going on now for a decade and more. I mean,
and you got proponents saying NAFTA's working, and you got those saying, "Look what NAFTA's done to us."
Mistake we've ever made. Sure. I mean, there's both sides of the story, and it plays right into what they're saying in this particular study.
Exactly. The other thing, strangely enough, what we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks: develop and attract skilled talent, and in particularly, they say the U.S. needs more robust manufacturing education programs, immigration reform, and promoting the attractiveness of manufacturing careers. And this actually gets back into the engineering end of it as well, where we've been talking about STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, math programs. There's got to be work being done to funnel and to interest young people into careers in manufacturing and careers in engineering, because that is where you're going to feed your market.
Absolutely. You know, this story that you're reporting on here, the survey, brings to mind a book that I know many of our readers have read. I think that you've read it as well, called The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman,
right.
which is now 15 years old or so. And Friedman made the point in that book, which I think is very germane to this, and I've remembered since I read it a few years back, that in the 50s, 60s, and 70s in particular, America brain drained the rest of the world because all the big jobs were here, all the big manufacturing and engineering jobs were here. If you were a brilliant Indian or Chinese or Japanese in many cases until the later part of that era, if you were a brilliant engineer from those countries and you wanted to have a great career, where were you going to go? There were no jobs in your country in many cases. So if you really wanted to make your mark, you came over to America, and you had to work in America. You know, you couldn't work for an American company easily in the 60s and 70s from India or China, let's say, or Russia. So you came here, you brought your family here, and that enriched those American companies. Now, the flattening of the world that Freeman talks about is this idea that with the internet, you can work anywhere. I mean, you can still possibly work for an American company, but you don't have to be here in the States. You could be in India. And maybe you want to work for an Indian company as well if you're home. Maybe it's just as easy to have that global economy. It really has changed the game. It has made it so that America is much less of a brain drain, and now it's kind of going in the other direction. Actually, some American graduates are going overseas to Europe or Asia for work. So it's turned on its head, and this is, you know, it depends on your perspective. You can look at this as being a worrisome trend. If you're American and you think that it's important that we have protectionism, or you can say, well, it's the next stage of development. It's a global economy.
That's actually the way I look at it. I'm not one of those people who believes in, you know, protective devices and stuff. You know, you've got a global economy. The world's getting smaller and flatter. You just have to deal. Honestly, seriously, you have to deal with it.
Yep,
you
have to
deal with it. Stop complaining about it. Just deal with it. It's the way it is, and make yourself more competitive in whatever way you can do it. Except, I don't believe that you need to do it through protectionist devices.
And it doesn't. Those don't work long term anyway.
And they don't work long term.
You know, they never really worked. I mean, they worked to a certain extent. You know, 50, 80, 100 years ago. Now, it really is not going to be effective.
By the way, interesting. We're stuck on number 2 here, but develop and track skilled talent. There was an interesting show on NPR last week that dealt in part with apprenticeship programs. The United States doesn't really have an apprenticeship mentality like they do in Europe. The program talked about, and Germany's got like something like 300 different apprentice tracks, I guess, apprentice type programs. I mean, everybody is an apprentice at some point in Germany. And of course, this feeds, you know, basically you got people who maybe they don't want to go to university, they don't want to go to college, or maybe they do, but they can funnel them into apprenticeship programs. Those become your labor force for the future. You have the mentoring, you have the transfer of knowledge that's continuing going on. We don't really have apprenticeship programs.
We talk about that a lot here, the fact that we don't have that, and because of that, when people retire from some of these higher tech fields and industries, they leave their companies kind of bereft of talent, and they have to, you know, that native, that tribal knowledge is lost, and the new generation that comes in has to kind of learn on their own, which isn't often very effective.
Right. Let me skip right to the fourth one here. Simplify and streamline the tax and regulatory structure. This one I think does make sense. I mean, I said you don't want protectionist devices, but I think you do want to make it easier and well, more lucrative for industry to do business. So I mean, you can't be. Matter of fact, one of the things he talks about here, the official U.S. statutory corporate tax rate stands at 39%. Closing the gap between statutory and effective rates, which are typically 28%, would be a revenue neutral way to put the U.S. manufacturing on a level global playing field. And I think that kind of thing does make sense. You're just making it easier for manufacturers to do their job without giving them a silver spoon or protecting them or whatever else.
Well, of course, we do know that will have an impact on the American.
Well, sure, it will. Yeah, obviously.
There's no, you know, it's not a zero-sum game. Yeah. You got to take it from somewhere else to get it in there.
But you know what I think is most interesting is we look at these 4 points. Which one did we spend the most time on?
Number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah.
That I think is critical. It all if you don't have your workforce, and if you're not encouraging them or through apprenticeship programs or knowledge or whatever, you know, where are you going to be?
It all comes down to your people, and if you don't have the people that can drive your organization forward, then you're nowhere. And American manufacturing, any manufacturer, is only as good as the people that work in their plant. So, yeah, great story. Thanks, Eric. Well, I had one as well that I wanted to cover, not my story, it's Bill Levinson's story, that appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. I know you're going to throw it up on our screen share.
No, I'm not actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. I'm not going to throw it on the screen share. I'll just talk about it. Is greenhouse gas mitigation socially responsible? Now, Bill in his story covers some points that he has covered, and if you know Bill Levinson, you know what he tends to discuss is a few key points. One of these is this idea of emissions, carbon emissions. One is the idea of lean and reducing muda and waste, and the other one is Henry Ford. And
right.
he ties all those three things together in this article. Every time. He's very, very consistent. But you know, his point is always well taken because he writes very elegantly. And he always makes an excellent point about this. What he's saying here is this idea that I think is taken as common currency now in culture, that greenhouse gas emissions are somehow socially irresponsible. If you are creating emissions, carbon emissions, that you're being socially irresponsible. What he's saying is cutting those emissions can be socially irresponsible as well.
Well, actually, let me back up. He's not saying, my understanding, he wasn't saying that cutting them was socially irresponsible. He says some of our programs that help to cut that could potentially be looked at as being socially irresponsible. Because they don't really cut them. They kind of shuffle them.
They shuffle them. That's an excellent point. It's not really mitigation.
It's not really. Yeah, that was the problem. It was an interesting choice of words. Maybe actually a mistake on his part because it's not really mitigation.
Yeah, no, it's not. You're not really mitigating. You're really shuffling. But it ties in with the article that you just covered in terms of competitiveness. Because Bill's real point here is that again, it's wasteful. And many times these emission neutral or the cap and trade or any of these programs to reduce emissions are not as efficient and not as cheap as some of the programs that exist now. So his problem with it primarily is that it's wasteful, and other nations, and we talked about China, and China is the one he refers to time and time again, and it's a great example. China has said in no uncertain terms they will not follow the Kyoto Accords. They will not. Right. They don't care. They feel as though it's not effective and that they are going to do what they feel is appropriate for their own nation. And so what Bill's saying here is that, well, if we as a country spend billions and trillions of dollars and as a world economy spend all this money to get rid of carbon emissions, to reduce emissions, which in his viewpoint is dubious in terms of whether it's going to slow global warming or not anyway. If we do all that and China doesn't, well, it's just going to accelerate the manufacturers going to China. As he says, under those smokestacks, if China's willing to have the smokestacks, underneath those smokestacks are a lot of not just low-paying industry and wage earners, but a lot of high-paying engineering and management jobs too, and those go away to China. So his point is well taken, and he brings it back to Henry Ford and the whole idea that if you have black soot going up your smokestacks, well, that's wasteful. That's coal that was unburned.
Right.
Ford also talked about the fact that you don't ever want to ship water. Shipping water is wasteful. Even shipping green wood, it contains water. It's wasteful. So Bill's idea is that you follow the money trail. The way to if you want to reduce emissions, follow the money trail, but it's got to make sense financially, fiscally.
Right. I mean, I think you have to kind of read between the, well, maybe not so much between the lines, but a little bit between the lines with Bill. His whole thing is that, look, regardless of what you think about greenhouse gases and whether it contributes to global warming or not, regardless, it's waste.
It's waste.
I mean, if you got stuff going out the stack or going into the water or whatever, it's waste, and reducing waste is a good thing. It's good for the bottom line, and oh yeah, gee whiz, by the way, it's good for the environment.
Well, he's also saying,
shifting it around, like he mentions carbon sequestration. That's not getting rid of the waste. No. It's just kind of like hiding it over here.
Well, and it's creating more waste because it's creating financial waste because the money to do that is
he talks
wasteful.
about supply chain and so forth.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it all kind of folds back on itself. But again, the point is really well taken. I think that Bill has again, he's circled back on this and he talks about this many times. And we always get a lot of comments from the readership when these articles run that people both in favor of what he said. I mean, hey, just mention global warming or greenhouse gas emissions, you're going to get a heck of a lot of feedback from the readership. So I think that this is something that we're going to continue to cover. Obviously, we have to continue to cover because it's of interest and it's important. And I think it's a quality issue. To me, it's a quality issue because it gets to the heart of efficiency and again, reducing waste. Whatever we can do to be more efficient is going to be for the good of organizations and the good of the world too. Yeah. But this idea that we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We have to sequester our carbon, cap and trade, or whatever it may be.
Right.
You're adding another dimension to it. You're adding another dimension that potentially or probably is going to be wasteful financially, because the costs are not going to, in Bill's viewpoint, the costs are not going to be worth the return you're going to get on it.
Right, and unless what you're doing is actually literally taking greenhouse gases out of your waste stream. I mean, if you're doing that, then the amount of money you're putting into actually reducing the amount of waste you're producing is actually going to come back and have a positive effect on the bottom line, as long as you can do that.
As long as you do that.
Yeah.
We talk about this a lot. We talk about this issue a lot of what is quality? What stories should we be covering? What stories do we want to bring to our users, our readership, our viewers on a regular basis, and what helps them do their jobs better? Well, these types of stories, which you may have noticed we've been covering more and more, are a little farther afield. And you can look at it and say, well, is that quality? Is it a quality perspective? Is it a viewpoint that resonates with people that are quality professionals? I personally think it does.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think it does, because I mean, really, from the perspective of quality, we're seeking to improve process. We're seeking to have better results for our customers and our users. Well, ultimately, I think we can all be agreed, we want less pollution.
Right.
Whether or not you agree with greenhouse gas emissions causing global warming or not, less pollution is a good thing. We know that pollution causes problems.
And we know, I mean, just bringing it back to a corporate level, we know that pollution is waste, and waste is money. That's all you need to know about the equation.
It really is that simple. Bill really does make it that simple, and I think we need to have that in mind too. That it is really that simple.
And by the way, waste is a quality issue. So I mean, we have had people. Why do you cover this greenhouse gas thing? And it's like, no? I mean, it's waste, and waste is a quality. It's always a quality.
It's always a quality issue, and it's something that I think more people than not write in and
nowadays understand.
And they understand what we're doing with that. And again, we're going to continue to do so. We encourage everyone out there. I encourage everyone out there to write us and let us know if you want to see us, continue to cover this type of a story, or what kind of stories you want us to cover. We're always interested in what the readers have to say about those things. So, both of these stories really, I think, were really, in a sense, talking about a very similar thing this week, I think. And whether or not, I don't want to get too far off the subject here. Okay. This idea, if I can circle back to it for a minute, of Americanism. Are we Americans? Because most of you out there watching us are Americans. Most of our readership is American. Are U.S. people. So, does it matter? Should we really be that concerned? Are we a part of a global economy, or are we out there on our own?
My feeling, and I've gone round and round on this with people, and I guess I don't worry about it myself.
I don't either.
I don't worry about it myself. It's a global economy. Do your job as a manufacturer. Do your job. Make a good product. Provide good customer service. Listen to your customers, and you're going to do
just
okay.
Fine. You're going to do just fine.
And if you don't, I think you need to go back and take a look at what you were doing. I mean, honestly,
there's billions and billions of people in this world. 5-6 billion people. I don't know what the number's up to now, but there's a lot of people in the world, right? And a lot of those people, the majority of them, are living in poverty. A lot of people living in poverty. So if this idea that manufacturing will be springing up all over the world, those people, again, the rising tide lifts all ships. To take it back to Henry Ford again. Hold on. To take it back to Henry Ford again. Ford always said he wanted to have his workers be able to afford to buy his cars. He supported his workers making enough money to be able to be not only his workers, but his consumers as well. He built his own customer base from paying them more. That's kind of what we're trying to get to here, I think.
And boy, I know we're going to get letters on this. China, I mean, look at what's happening in China. I remember back when, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we have all this work going to China. So, the Chinese, they're wrecking our economy, and I'd ask the question, well, in the long run, don't you think it's going to be good for them? You're going to raise their quality. No, all that money is just going to go into the coffers of the CEOs and the companies themselves. It'll never trickle down to the worker. But we know that's not the case. We see the standard of living. I mean, it does work, and I'm not saying it's not disproportionate. I'm not saying there's not a lot of corruption in a lot of the overseas countries. Like there's no corruption here.
Of course.
Exactly. But it does seem to be working in those countries where for better or worse, our industry is going, it does seem to be raising the quality of living for them. And I say, shoot, man, that's a good thing. I don't worry about us, I guess.
And you know, as an American, as a consumer, as somebody who likes stuff, toys.
And I still buy stuff.
Sure, we all do. We all buy stuff, right? I mean, I don't want to ascribe my feelings towards anybody else in another culture, but it seems to me that people want sneakers, they want CDs and DVDs, they want nice cars, they want to be able to travel. I mean, I think there are some commonalities across all the world, across cultures, that people want nice stuff. They want to be comfortable. Yeah. They certainly want good health care and clean water and good education. I mean, we know that as a bottom line. So all these things play into the fact that there's plenty for everybody if we look at this as a global marketplace with global consumers.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a little bit.
Okay.
Because I know there are people out there who are going to hear this and
say, you're crazy.
You're crazy. And one of those people would be like, okay, you know, I lost my job. Mm-hmm. And I lost my job because my company's products are now being made in India for a fraction of the cost. So eventually we lost our market share and my company went under. What the heck are you talking about?
Well, it happens. I mean, no one's going to deny that's going to be it's going to be a common occurrence. There's never a seamless shift of this kind.
Right. Unfortunately, there's always going to be somebody who gets thrown under the bus. And if you're that person, your viewpoint is going to be way different than mine.
But you know what? It's your responsibility. We do this. I mean, everybody has to have the responsibility of keeping your eye on the horizon and saying, like, what new techniques and skills do I need to have to keep myself as employable as possible? Is there a small company that I can start myself if I potentially lose my job? Right. Can I consult with some of these overseas companies, knowing what I've developed in my career? I mean, there's always ways, if you keep your eye on the horizon and beyond it, to prepare yourself as well as you can for any eventuality. But no, it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be some displacement. It just is the way it is. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. So
I think we could talk about this for another hour.
Okay. We've been on it for a while, but no, but you know, this is what we do here at QDL. We try to have these conversations, and we want to encourage you to
flog a dead horse,
to jump in with us and to discuss these ideas with us as well. But yeah, that's our show for today. Before we go. We wanted to, one more time, because we're leaving for Quality Expo here in a couple of days.
That's right, Quality Expo is coming up. Yep. Quality Expo runs from September 20th to the 22nd, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to be there with Technorazzi Live. That's our live program that we do from Quality Expo, among other places. And we're going to be looking at a product from Creaform. Mm-hmm. So I encourage you guys to keep an eye on your email, because you will be getting an email inviting you to that live presentation.
Yep, on the 20th. Yep.
On the 20th, yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so look out for that. And that's our show. So like I say, next week will be at Quality Expo. We hope to see you all out there. Thanks for joining us here today, and we will see you next week, and have a great weekend.
So long.
Thank you.